Welcome to Learning for Love, Lessons for Life. Today, we are going to talk about the power of peer support and how important that is, especially when we're trying to take care of ourselves, when we're in caregiving roles of some kind, whatever that looks like, caring for other people, whether it's our children, our parents, both, and also in our professional roles. So I'm really excited today to have Kristine Theurer with us, who we'll talk to in a little while. And to start us off, we have a gentleman named John Hamilton, and I'm really excited to introduce you to both of these individuals. They are both so inspirational. So John, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Lisa, just thank you so much for having me. And Shane, thank you so much for my help. And in honor of this occasion, I've actually taken off my COVID hairstyle and I put on my bald wig.
Well, I'm glad about that. You look amazing.
Okay.
So I wanted to, just to start us off, I wanted to invite you on the show because I know that you're a very loving and doting caregiver for your amazing wife, Helena. And I know you're going to tell us a little bit more about that. And so I wondered if you could start us off by sharing maybe that little bit of something that you have written, and I'll let you share a little bit more about that.
Well, thank you. You know, we were known along at the McCormick home where my dear Helena was as the lovers. And I'm sure there were so many lovers there, but we just happened to always get their pictures in the paper or on a poster or something like that. And at one stage, I was invited to just say something about McCormick home. Not something nice, just something about. And knowing McCormick home, it could only be nice. So
the long-term care home, right? The long-term care home you're referring to?
Long-term care, and also she spent 5 years in the day program and sometimes in weekend respite and certainly long-term care. So 5 + 3 years.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
I call this McCormick Cares, written for Helena Hamilton McCormick Care Group by John Hamilton. And excuse the accent. It sounds like Rabbi Buttons. In the spring of the year across the pond, I met my lovely lass. Yes, I met her first in Sunday school, in the kindergarten class. I should have known that she was special, a playing on the floor. Oh, yes, 'tis true, our eyes did meet when she was only 4. One never knows what life will bring and who will play our special tune. At 24, we left and sailed for Canada on a lengthy honeymoon. For 56 years, we made new friends and felt so welcomed here. We loved and lived forever thoughts, with many who became so dear. But folks, before my lover left, something crept on her with stealth. They called it a dementia, and it slowly stole her health. Oh, where to turn, where to run for help, how to help this special soul. I found it at McCormick Care. Now let's learn about its role. The journey started through a referral to an evening care on caring. You see, it's a journey one should not try alone. It needs a lot of sharing. As months went by, it was clear that a day had 24 hours. Yes, dementia called me up. This dementia gobbled up that time and sapped me of my powers. Once again, McCormick in wisdom said, a daily respite we should try. At a trial visit, I was scared, but she loved it. One could see it in her eye. Their famous outreach program, served by many folk who they adore. One feels that kind of caring is a vocation when it greets you at the door. When winter came into our lives, McCormick Care was the same. She was walked along the hall to join a family in lovely Memory Lane. There too, so many loving, caring staff have been enriching life for years. This was now her home away from home, run by friendly angels dear. Laid beneath the honor quilt, a staff came from every floor. They moved her gently with a prayer, not to suffer any more. Oh, this fine place upon a hill is one of the finest in our nation, judged by peers so many times with exemplary accreditation. I have such grateful, happy thoughts that they loved her to the end. I saw them shed a happy tear to have known her and to be trusted to befriend. They then went back in to refurbish a room to give another soul a place. I pray for a province, a country, a world that treats all folk with such grace. Thank you for letting me read that.
Very well written. Thank you. Thank you so much. I know they were heartfelt words, and I know how much McCormick meant to you. McCormick Dementia Services, the day program in the long-term care home. And I wanted you to share that. One, because I know that you had shared about how in the beginning of your journey with Helena having dementia, you mentioned how it was really hard for you to accept any type of support, any type of help whatsoever, and it was affecting your own health.
Lisa, I wasn't even admitting that she was sick. I knew there was something else going on. One, she'd never been ill in her life apart from having two babies. That's the only time she was in hospital. Then slowly things were changing, and I was in denial. And I feel guilty about that to this day. Not only when we found out that she really did have a diagnosis, I was keeping it to myself.
Right.
I even went to Scotland for a holiday to a little cottage that we had there at the time, and we had friends from London come and visit, and I didn't even tell them that there was something wrong with my lover. They were detecting it. I didn't. There was a time when I actually decided, because being Scottish, I didn't want their hairdresser to think she wasn't tipping. In fact, in the end, she wasn't even paying. So I had to go with her, and I said, "Could you do this?" She says, "Yes, well, I've done something looking like you before," she said. And so I said, "She's got dementia." She says, "John, I've known that for 2 years."
Huh.
And isn't that wonderful?
Yeah.
This
So what would you, sorry, John, but I wondered if you could just share with us, when you're on this show and people are maybe just starting to get into experiencing what you have, what would you suggest, or what kinds of insights would you share? Maybe even looking at yourself previously, what would you suggest to your previous self on what would make the path a little bit more easy for you?
Well, I think it's not like a peer group. And as I've said, this Chesterfield I'm sitting on, so many people heard that I was having problems with Lena. I knew people who had friends and family and lovers with dementia, and I should have gone and talked to them. That would have been wonderful. They could have shared. Now they're all different, and
Yes.
there's no two the same. And thank goodness, they're all like me. But yeah, there's so many things. Uh, what I would tell them is to keep friends. Don't be friends. Don't become a recluse. Don't say, "I am the total person in charge and I will look after Helena," whoever it is, and,
Right.
and I'll shut my doors. I kept her in public. My friends kept her in public. They were happy to have her.
Yeah.
I took her to church. She sat in the pew. She never sat still apart from that hour at church.
Right.
And she wasn't asleep.
Yeah, we talked about this, didn't we, John, on how there's, for somebody with dementia, there's certain places that it still makes sense for them to be appropriately quiet and calm, right? With the setting of church, for example.
When I said to your friend Kristine that I'm amusical, and Lena was amusical as well. I think she was once told to stop singing in a choir, and she never sang again. But she loved the music at McCormick here. She loved the music at church, and I can see her eyes light up. So take them to places that you want them to be as long as possible, and don't be embarrassed about them.
And don't be too proud, maybe, right? It sounds like maybe at the beginning were you feeling like you didn't want to admit that you needed help?
I was complicated because remember I had taught medicine at pharmacology for 36 years, and everybody I taught would be in a clinic I would take her to, and so it's I suppose I maybe cheated her a little bit because we had a home physician, we had a lovely geriatric gerontologist come to our home and looked after her all the time.
Wow.
Can I tell you a funny thing about you? We're not allowed to talk politics, and I'm not even going to mention Mr. Trump, but this cognitive testing, and I just laughed when I heard this and all explained, and I still remember poor Dave Harris saying to Lena, "Now, I'm going to tell you 3 words: yellow, a window, and honesty. Say them." So she did, and so 10 minutes later, he said, "Now, can you repeat those 3 words?" And she just looked at him, put her hands on her hip and said, "I really don't care." I don't know if she passed the test, but you've got to laugh. You've got to laugh or you'll cry.
You have to laugh. And John, thank you so much. I'm going to stop us there only for the sake of time. And I want to make sure that we're able to connect with you later on with Kristine as well. Absolutely. But you bring up some good points. The fact that we need to be able to rely on other people. We need to relate to other people. and also using things like humor and just being in the moment. So thank you so much for that. I really appreciate, the feedback you have from your experience that you've had so far.
Thanks for having the class clown on.
And I hope you stick around, because after we talk to Kristine, I want to bring you back again.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, John.
Bye. Lots of game.
Thank you. So next, we're going to talk with Kristine Theurer, and I'm really excited to have her on the show as well. And it's an interesting reason on why Kristine and I connected. So she'll tell you more about Java Care Group. I love Java, so that's one piece of it. And John talked more about having a loved one who used day program services as well as long-term care. Kristine has worked also in long-term care. We both have similar experiences that way in our past. And because of those experiences, and I'll let her share the rest, she's really developed some ideas to help that way. But any program and any service, they don't just exist. They become, and they're developed because of a reason or a need for it. So also on the topic of peer support, I would love to welcome Kristine Theurer, and thank you for just being so open to me contacting you whenever. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. It's such a pleasure to do this with you. And I also want to thank John. That poem that you read, John, was so beautiful. I was very moved by it, and moved to tears, actually. And it's anyway, it was just it's such a pleasure to be on here talking about my favorite topic, which is peer support. I talk about it all the time, and and you're right, it didn't just come out of nowhere. So I've worked in senior living homes for many years. I started out as a music therapist, and then worked as a recreation therapy director, and then I went back into research. And I think that the journey that led me to Java. So we're talking about the Java group programs, which are a series of peer support and mentoring programs that really engage residents in helping each other.
Right.
That came about because of my own personal experience in my life. And what happened was that when I was a teenager, I had an older brother, who committed suicide. And as you can imagine, that was just a terrible time in our family. We didn't know how to talk about it. And so we didn't talk about it. And somehow in my teenage brain, I decided that it was my fault. Somehow, I don't know how I put that together, but I did, and I carried that with me, into my 20s, and I tried some counseling and some therapy, but I just had this grief in me that I could not, get rid of. And a friend of mine said to me, Kristine, you should go to a grief peer support group. And I said to her, why would I do that? I'm going to sit around a table with a bunch of sad people, and we're all going to be sad together. Like, how could that possibly help me?
Right.
And she said, you should go. And I'm so glad I listened to her, because I went, and it was amazing. I had no idea what a peer support group is. It's like to sit with people who are going through the same thing as you.
Yeah.
It's better than anything. I laughed with them. I cried with them. And then I laughed some more. And I couldn't believe, the things that I was laughing about were the things that I kept hidden, the things that I was just stuffing down and trying to live my life without. And so then I looked around where I was working in senior living, and I saw so much loneliness. And it didn't matter how many activities we had going on. We had, calendars full of social events.
Yeah.
Bingo, bus trips, bowling, entertainment. I was part of that. I was a part of doing that. And yet there were lonely residents everywhere. I would see them. I'd walk down the hallway, and, Mary would reach out her hand. She'd want to talk to me, and I'd see the loneliness. Residents were starving for meaningful connection, for real, to talk about what was really going on in their hearts. And we were feeding them entertainment and distraction. And, well-meaning people, we were all well-meaning people. We were doing the best we could. And so I thought, why don't we have peer support groups in senior living? I looked around, they were just non-existent. They existed out in the community, of course. They were, peer support groups for Alzheimer's people with living with early dementia. The Cancer Society uses them, but nowhere in senior living homes themselves. And so I thought, well, I've been part of a grief support group. I'll just do one. How hard can it be? And so I got our group of residents together and we sat around a table, and it just disintegrated immediately. There were two men in that group who didn't like each other, and they got into a fight, and they got in a huff, and they got up and left, and we hadn't even started the group yet. And then another woman started talking, and she went yak, 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 yak. She could not stop. And
Yeah.
I realized, oh, we need some structure. And so we
Right.
and that's how Java, actually, the Java Music Club, the first program actually came to be, was through that. I learned that we have to add some structure.
Right. And I can speak to that. The fact that you use, I know that there's a talking stick that you use that's structured, and because, it's beautiful too. And because of the fact that it really empowers everybody, the experiences I've had anyway is just amazing, because it helps the people living in long-term care to be just as helpful and purposeful by being peer support, like John's saying, for each other, and to create their own community with the connections that are right around them with that same, they're able to relate in long-term care. When people who are working there, we don't necessarily see it the same way. So I love it and really appreciate the program.
Yeah, it's interesting that the research that backs up peer support groups, why they're so phenomenal. Well, first of all, there's no pill for loneliness. It just doesn't exist. And the prescriptions for depression are, a lot of studies now showing they have massive side effects and very little good effects. Unless you have severe depression, it doesn't really make a difference. And so we think, well, what else can we do? And I remember a resident recently saying to me, who was in the Java Music Club, she said, when I joined this group, she said, I just thought to myself, thank God, finally we have somewhere to talk about things other than what's for lunch.
Yeah. Some depth to the conversation, some purpose and meaning behind it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much, Kristine. I want to bring back John to chat with us, so I'll stop us there, and we'll get ready to have us all back on and kind of have some wrap up take-home messages for everybody listening, because I think this is so important, knowing that we need to be able to relate to one another in whatever type of setting we're in, and whatever makes sense for us personally too, given our own personalities and our own skills and so on. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa.
And my pleasure. So now I invite both John Hamilton and Kristine Theurer to come back on with me to wrap up the rest of this and see if we can have some final messages for us. What I want to start with is, John, I want to first, I guess, refer to you in the sense that I know that you're a very social individual. So that I think that comes naturally for you, which is, I think, a gift of yours. You do have lots of friends and a wonderful network around you. And I think you're the reason that's the case, is because you do reach out, and because it's so natural for you. You attract other people. But what I'm wondering, Kristine, I'm going to bring it back to you and ask, just from your experience and what you've learned through the years, are there options for people who might not be so social, like for people who are maybe quieter or more introverted? Have you run across ideas that would help somebody like that to reach out and find those peer supports that they need in another way?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think in terms of senior living, which is where my experience is, the majority of residents don't come to things. And typically there's that same 30% of residents that come to everything.
Right.
And so it looks like there's a lot going on, but it's the same people if you look closely. So the people that don't come to things, and I think, the reason that the Java mentorship program, the third program that we developed, was because of that. And the answer to your question is, I think that residents can help each other more than anyone else. Better than an expert coming to knock on the door is your peer to come to see you and say, how are you doing?
Right.
And I think residents, they typically get cast as what we call passive recipients of care. So they, and they enter long-term care, and then they become cared for by, all of us who are running around doing things to and for them.
Right.
And the best thing we could do possibly is to engage residents in reaching out and nurturing and comforting, supporting each other.
Yeah, awesome. Well said. Well said for sure. And John, I bet you can touch on that a little bit. Do you want to make a comment?
Well, actually, you said I attract people. I don't attract people. I love people. I love my students. I love the groups I'm in. I very often end up on the stage with them, and then they all know me, and it's very embarrassing when you meet you in a store, and they all know who you are, and I'm not which group they're in. But it's the way to do it. I have had calls in the last few weeks from a student that I had in 1964 who said, "Thank you, John." And somebody who wants her to come to reunion, the class of 74, because they wanted to tell me how awful I was. I made them work so hard. They found out what they could do, and they still love me. Now, this is the third thing. Now, may I just, and you can cut this out if you don't want to. I am so sad about your brother committing suicide.
Yeah.
I spent 10 years of my life. I was one of the founder members of the Contact Crisis Centre in London, forerunner of the Distress Centre, and we went on the phones night after night, weekend after weekend, sometimes just hearing terrible stories. But we were their peers until we sent them to another peer group, be it a church, a social group, or a medic.
Beautiful.
You
bring for your work. Yeah,
you bring really good points, and I'm so glad you said that, John. Sometimes when the conversation goes on, it's hard to come back to that.
Okay, yeah. I was John 16, because we never give our real names. But when I went on the air one time, one of the drug detail men said, "Hi, John, I heard you were on the radio." It was your voice.
Well, yeah, thank you just for being so vulnerable and sharing that, Kristine. I know that's something that I think that story, it's not just a story because it's your life and that's what's happened. And sometimes I know that we grow into individuals, and it adds meaning to our lives because obviously it's helped you develop something so meaningful for other people. So thank you. And it sounds like, he lives on really through the work that you're doing. So I appreciate that. And John, you mentioned also about peer support in other ways. And I think that's also a ticket, because Kristine's touching on people in long-term care and what that looks like. And I think people who are still, living in the community, you mentioned connecting people and reaching out to your church or friends, or, finding somebody who you trust with, the sensitive.
Can I throw a curveball at you? I
Sure.
think the people in long-term care, and I think the PSWs need peers. I love to see signs on the wall. Tell your colleague how wonderful they were today. Tell them how it was good of you to do that, and just share. I used to send messages to Lena, not to Lena because she didn't understand them, but things that you would say, "Hi, hope this photograph of you at our Good Friday supper, you're like, hope you're just as happy as you were at the wonderful weekend at London's best club." Tell them it's London's best club.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody needs to feel like they're connected in some way and have other people to connect with.
And I still take the lady that runs Memory Lane's life support, not life support system, what's it called? Life enrichment. Cut that out. I still bring her cookies and musicians to play at their entertainment. And I love that.
That's excellent. It's formed long relationships for you. And it also, I think, allows you to connect with even residents in long-term care who aren't Helena anymore, but you're still able to give back in that way.
We explain that. I'll not take too much time. I still have a lady that calls me every night, and if not, I call her every night. And her husband died 2 years before Lena at McCormick Home. We met so many people. I go to lunch with people. I go walkies with young ladies, my number twos, I call them, and we get lost in the woods, and we giggle.
John, thank you so much. Kristine, thank you so much. And really, this is just talking about the different perspectives of the power of peer support, whether it's for an individual who has a loved one who has dementia, or somebody who's experienced something so, well, if it's okay to say, traumatic and such losses in life. So no matter what you're going through, we all have these life stories. And I just really appreciate you both joining me today and sharing what you have. So thank you so much for this.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today for this episode talking about the power of peer support. This is very important, I feel, and I think that John Hamilton mentioned some good points about how he found support when he wasn't necessarily looking for it. And he was really encouraged to seek support in certain areas. And so what was really important was that once he did, he felt very connected, and he's continued to have long-standing relationships with a lot of the people, even in a long-term care home, even after his wife has passed away. And Kristine talked about the importance of peer support even in long-term care, which we don't talk about very often. So that's also a significant piece for us to remember, that it doesn't mean that just because you're in long-term care or in the community or anywhere in between, that we can't have those connections that we need to keep us healthy and keep us feeling purposeful and have a meaning going forward. So I really appreciate us being able to talk about this, and I look forward to the next time that we talk on this show for Learning for Love and Lessons for Life, and I'll see you then. Thank you.